There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
I'm delighted to welcome a brand new guest to Bite Size Book Chats. She has been following me, I think, on YouTube, but certainly on Goodreads for quite a while. She has a very memorable avatar, and this is Radhika from Canada. Radhika, welcome.
Hi. Hello.
Your channel, you had a booktube channel. Well, you do have a booktube channel. You just haven't made a video in 9 months, but I have faith that you will come back. It's called RK Reads. You also have a very active blog, which is called The Scientific Detective, that is mostly quite a bit about books. So tell us what's going on your booktube channel and on your blog.
Right. So The Scientific Detective emerged from a desire to have a place to just nerd out about all the things that I like, which is why it's doesn't have a literary name to it. But it eventually became just a place where I talked about books because I like to write and I like to read. So there was my spot. And then I reached out through YouTube because I enjoyed the booktube community. And I thought, why not extend the blog to a video format? But video editing is time consuming. So I went back to my blog for a bit.
Well, I hope you do come back to booktube. And some of the very best, most popular booktubers do barely any editing whatsoever.
Yeah, I barely edit.
I heavily edit mine because I need all the help I can get in the editing department. I'm like,
yes.
I have to edit out all my hiccups. But what kind of stuff do you like to read typically? What would we find on your blog in terms of literary genres or whatever book kind of books?
So I read anything that interests me, but if I were to group it, it would be nonfiction or predominantly like literary fiction, I guess you would call it that. But I don't restrict myself to that. It's just whatever.
Yeah, that's all that I read pretty much, literary fiction. That's why you've been paying attention to what I've been doing online. So great. We are here to talk about maybe a middle grade novel, and the author is from New Zealand, but the story is not set there. It's called The Raging Quiet by Sherryl Jordan, originally published 1999, and you loved it. Tell us why.
Yes. So first of all, this novel does not take place on any specific island or location, but it is very much based in a Middle Ages culture, specifically Christianity, because of the events that take place in the book. I liked it because, so originally when I read this when I was younger, I hated it and I didn't know why, and I still don't know why. So I saw it. I'm like, I don't understand why I don't like this. Let me reread it again. And I loved it. So I have no explanations for my decisions when I was young. But the reason why I really liked it is because of three things. One would be the main character. I enjoy strong female characters, and strongness doesn't necessarily mean like she's a leader or anything. She's quite the opposite, but she takes care of herself and she's fine, especially since the author kept her to what she would be doing in her time period. She wouldn't be, she's like a middle-aged a woman living in the Middle Ages, right? So there are restrictions there. The second thing that I liked is the communication and the bond that's formed between the two main characters. It's very well developed, and you can tell that the author knew what she was doing, and that partly becomes from her own experience working with people who are deaf, right, or hard of hearing. So she has her own experience there. So it really showed here because she knew what she was talking about. So there's that. And the way that they learn to communicate, the way that they develop their relationship and friendship is just stupendous, especially considering the age group that it was going for.
So this is set in the Middle Ages.
Yes.
And there's beyond that, geography is really non-specific. It's in a tiny village. But we don't really get any sense of what country. It's obviously not New Zealand because there weren't many villages. Well, there probably were villages, Maori villages in New Zealand. That's not what this story is. And the protagonist, Marnie, she is hearing.
Yes.
And then she meets a young man, Raver.
Yeah.
He's deaf. So great.
He's deaf.
All right.
The third thing is there's, how certain books have tropes. This book, there's one very famous trope where like the chosen one or the hero or like the unusual one that is chosen because of their unusualness, like those types of tropes. This author takes that trope and uses it against all the characters that are talked about. So it's really cleverly done, because I know a lot of people complain that they hate that chosen one trope. So she shows, especially considering the community and the type of culture that is in place, how being an outlier works against you. And yet, she doesn't obviously encourage forcing yourself to assimilate to a culture or practice you don't want to, but just also accepting the consequences when you live in a society that won't change. So it's very interesting.
She does something interesting with a trope that would otherwise be kind of a cliche. And it's a chunky novel, 362 pages.
Yeah. I mean, I read it in 2 or 3 days, but it's really good.
It's a page turner.
Yeah, she knows how to pace it really well, and I don't think the chapters are too long.
You have this listed as not only one of your favorites, but one of your top books of all time.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit more about why you love this book so much.
Part of it is because of those 3 things, because, so I was just amazed and blown by it. The other thing is just a lot of the themes that she brings up, you don't really see in a lot of other books, especially books that talk about disabilities. So, for example, in one instance, when she first starts to become friends with Raver, he is deaf. She doesn't know he's deaf. People are not, they don't know initially why he acts the way he does, because they don't know he's deaf, and he's mimicking people because he thinks that's what they're doing to him, right? Because he can't hear. And so certain themes about, do you need to talk so much, or do you need to really communicate every single thing verbally in order to understand another person? Things about even how their relationship works, because the idea of a traditional relationship, staying together, being together, doing things together, that gets challenged too, because they both realize what type of free spirits they are. They both realize what they don't want from each other, but also what they need from each other. So that was also well done, considering, again, who this was aimed for. I've seen, a lot of, I guess, literary genre type books that just do it so badly. They'll get an award or something, because they talk about something else really well. So that really impressed me.
Marnie, the female protagonist, the hearing character, she's a newcomer to this village.
Yes.
And the village is called Takura. And the young man who is deaf, he is not a newcomer. Is that right?
No. He has lived there for most of his life. He doesn't have a family.
Okay.
We don't know anything about his past. And he's mostly taken care of the local priest. But even the priest doesn't regularly take care of him. It's once in a while. But even the priest also doesn't quite understand him. So it's really interesting, because when Marnie comes, she also doesn't initially understand him. And she also thinks, so the thing is, everyone in the village thinks he's mad. He's like the village lunatic, because they don't understand him and he doesn't understand them.
So by the time Marnie arrives at the village, the other residents of the village have not figured out that Raver is deaf?
No, not at all.
That sounds crazy, but I guess.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is like in the first chapter itself, but like you get a very vivid introduction to Raver that stays in your head for the entire novel, and you understand this community immediately from that instant.
Have you read anything else by Sherryl Jordan? She's a New Zealand children's writer. Yes. She's written a ton of books, I now see.
No, but I plan to now.
Yeah. Radhika, thank you so much for telling us about it.
Thank you.
I'm here with Roz from Cape Town, South Africa. Welcome back, Roz.
Hi, Sean. I'm assuming that was hello. It's nice to be back.
This is a very unusual interview because Roz cannot hear me. There's something wrong. I think it's on her end, but I can hear her. And so I'm going to be typing the questions to her, but I'll also be asking them, and I'm going to be pasting it all together. So Roz used to be a booktuber, and I hope that she will come back. And everybody gets so excited when she shows up on my channel. So here she is again, and we are here to talk about a Jamaican novel, The Long Song by Andrea Levy, which was published in 2010. So please tell us about the opening premise and whatever else you'd like to say about it.
Okay, so Andrea Levy is a British writer who comes from, who had Jamaican parents. And the story, The Long Song, is set in Jamaica during the 1830s, I believe it is, when there was a war in Jamaica. And it's to do with slavery in Jamaica, which is one of the reasons why I said that going into this book blind was the best thing that I could have done, because if I'd known that, I probably would have postponed picking it up. It sounds like a heavy read.
Who is the protagonist and who are some of the other main characters?
Okay, so the protagonist is a young woman by the name of July. You are with July at her conception, which is not consensual. And as I said, it's not the lightest of reads, but you're with her at her conception, and you are with her and her mother when the mistress of the house, who's actually not the wife, but the sister of the master, she decides that she wants to take July as her lady in waiting. No, that would be too higher up. Her chambermaid, whatever. She renames her to Marguerite because, nothing sounds better than Marguerite when you're calling someone, and July sounds very plod along. So you're with July and a random collection of characters throughout this process as we encounter the end of slavery. But there's never really an actual end, because it's not like they can go off and go get a job now and own a business. And you meet July's son. July's wow, can't call her husband. The man who impregnated July first was murdered that day, and she ends up giving the child to the church, and he is raised fantastically. He is taken through to England, where he gets a wonderful education, and he is one of the co-narrators of the story. This is sounding very heavy at the moment, but the way the story is done, you have July in the present as an old woman who is narrating her story. So you have her issues with her son as she is writing her story, because he is in publishing and he's saying to her, no, Ma, you can't do that. And every now and again, he interjects and he adds his piece. And although the story is actually devastating when you summarize it like this, it is actually very lightly written. I think that's one of the reasons why there's been a lot of Marmite reaction to this book. A lot of people love it, or a lot of people hate it. But I think that the lightness makes it more effective, the humorous moments and everything else, because you then really appreciate what is dark. If the entire book was just heavy, you would come out of it with nothing but this horrible feeling of gloom, whereas it's actually told in a very light way. I haven't read her Small Island. I haven't found it yet.
Okay.
I'm looking for it.
I read her novel, Small Island, and I think the problem for me was that I was reading it over too long of a time. I was reading 17 books at the same time, and I kept putting it down for a month and picking it up. So I lost the thread of it. I'll probably try it again. So
you bailed on The Long Song. Am I understanding that right? Not on Small Island.
On Small Island. On Small Island.
Okay. I've heard a lot of people preferred Small Island to The Long Song.
I'm the only person I know that didn't get along with Small Island.
Okay, so I probably would get along.
I think it was just me. There's a rebellion in Jamaican history that I'd never heard of, but it's mentioned in the synopsis. The Baptist War, it goes by a bunch of different names, that the characters experience. Was that a pretty major part of the story?
No, it wasn't a major part of the story. It was about maybe 2 chapters. Uh-huh. It was pretty much at the climax where things start to change. or not change as much as one would hope. Yeah, the irony involved in a war named after a church, and there was that much horror going on. Yeah. There were some scenes, but not a lot, because she wasn't there. And July didn't write about what she didn't see herself. So, yeah, she was kept away. While you're typing, I'm having coffee.
So, yeah, we're having this on a March 26th, and just a couple days ago, Jamaica announced that they're going to be done with the Royals. They're going to be independent, and there's quite a lot of opinion about all of that, including a sizable opinion that the Royals themselves should apologize for the evils of slavery.
What is the apology going to do? It's just words. To quote George R.R. Martin, words are wind. It was his favorite line. He said it many times. And I don't think it's actually going to do anything.
In your review, I'm going to link to your review in the show notes. You used the word innocence. You enjoyed the humanness of the characters, the humor, and also the innocence. Can you say more about the innocence?
It was July's innocence that I enjoyed. As I said to you, this book could have been written in such a way that it would have been heavy and devastating, etc. And it was kept light because of her innocence. The way she viewed people, the fact that they would still try and, sneak drinks, or they would successfully sneak drinks at parties where the white people were having things. That kind of thing was very innocent. And it was only when her mother was killed that her view changed and she became less innocent. But then her naivety still kept things a lot lighter. But especially in the beginning, her innocence, her lack of deep embedded hatred towards people, she didn't have that. Mm-hmm. She still managed to stay with the people who she worked for, slaved for, and find humor in situations where most people wouldn't have. But then that was her life. It was what she knew.
So this has been a very unusual interview because Roz can't hear me. I think she's really enjoying not having to listen to me prattle on, but I'm typing the questions to her, so she's getting it one way or the other. She did a fabulous job. So Roz, thank you for telling us about the book, and we'll try this again when all the audio, visual, everything is working tickety-boo. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. It was a pleasure being here, and I look forward to coming on your channel again at some point with sound.
Nancy from the Literate Quilter blog and from the Detroit area is back, gracing us with her presence once again. Hello, Nancy.
Hello, Sean.
You're also a real trooper for doing this early in the morning, your time, in the evening, my time. It's wine o'clock here in Tokyo, but it's tea o'clock and toast o'clock where you are. So thank you. The next time we do this, I will be living in Saskatchewan, so the time zone difference will not be so crazy. We're here to talk about a debut novel that is set in Michigan, where Nancy lives. It's called Chevy in the Hole by Kelsey Ronan, just published in just a few weeks ago. We're recording this April 7th. It dropped on March 15th. You loved it. You related to it. Your review has already sold me, but I'd just like you to sell me even further and all my viewers. So tell us about this book.
Hi. Well, Sean, I was very interested in reading the book because it was set locally, which doesn't always mean I like the book. Because if you're not really from the area and you don't portray the area correctly, it's very obvious. Chevy in the Hole is Kelsey Ronan's first book. She is a native of Flint, Michigan, who's living in Detroit, Michigan, teaching different writing classes through different organizations. And she called it her love letter to Flint. The story is about a young man who overdoses. He's been sober for a year, but he has an overdose and goes back to Flint to start over, living with his sister. And he is encouraged to do some volunteer work by his support group. And he goes to an urban farm where he meets a young Black woman, a college student named Monet. And it's about their relationship. It's about their families' backstories, which takes us deep into the history of the area. And the theme of the book is really very much like Detroit's motto: we hope for better things, we will rise again from the ashes.
So Monet's family, African-American family, also had roots in Michigan.
They came up during the Great Migration. Monet is the first of her family to go to college, and there's a great deal of hope placed on her career. So here she is, she's a college student, volunteering, running this farm, which is her passion. Augustus is very attracted to her on many levels, not just because of her beauty, but mostly because of her strength. She knows who she is, she knows what she wants, she knows where she's going, and he lacks those things. Augustus's family has roots that go back to the GM sit-down strike in Flint, Michigan, where the strikers trying to unionize just sat down and closed the factory, and the Women's Auxiliary League brought food into them. That history is portrayed in a chapter in the book. Mm-hmm. Another chapter in the book takes us back to the 1967 riots and how that affected Flint. And the book is taking place during the Flint water crisis.
It's a very traumatic time for the city.
It still is a traumatic, it really hasn't been completely resolved.
It's fallen out of the headlines, but I'm not surprised that it hasn't been completely resolved.
Yeah.
Aside from the personal connection, which I want to hear a little bit about in a minute, why did you love this book so much?
I thought that the characters were so beautifully drawn, and you really cared for these characters. I often think when I read a book about young people, how am I going to relate? I'm so far beyond that. I mean, all my choices are behind me. I'm looking at a whole different point of life. And when an author is able to bring me into the lives of young people in this way, I think that really says a lot for the characterization.
The setting here is also the main character or one of the main characters?
Yes, very much a portrayal of Flint. Its whole history is in there, the spirit of the people. When you see them fighting for justice, both in unionizing for justice during the 60s, justice because their water's poisoned, their children are being hurt. You see a character of this city that they might be poor, they might be a has-been city because the car industry pulled out, left them behind, the state left them behind, but they have such strength and power.
Nancy has written a wonderful review. I will link to it on her blog, which you should all be checking out on a regular basis anyway, the Literate Quilter. But what I got from your review was that one of the main things that this novel does and does extremely well is to show how place shapes character. I'm going to read the quote that you excerpted, Monet speaking here. I think you decide on someone and somewhere, and that devotion is the sense it all makes. You choose someone and you try your best for them. I'll take it if there's more, but that's enough for me. That's the way I love you. That's the way I love this place.
Yes.
Powerful, powerful statement.
Yes, it was. And I think that really does sum up the book.
And tell us about your personal connection to this place and this book.
Having lived in Southeast Michigan most of my life, I'm very familiar with so many things that are talked about in the book. I mean, they go to the art museum and see the Diego Rivera murals. They go to the Belle Isle Aquarium. As kids, we went there to see the fish. They drive up the expressway and go past the Jesus sign along the side of the road that I remember seeing the first time my husband took me up to his home just outside of Flint. And every time I saw that going up the road, I knew we were almost to Grand Blanc. His father, my husband's father, grew up in Flint. He went to Flint schools. His father had come to Flint for automotive job and then died of tuberculosis. And his mother went to work at the factory, and she worked on the factory floor. And she was also a part of the GM sit-down strike by participating in the Women's Auxiliary League, taking food to the men. She was a very proud union member.
Lots of associations, and a very auspicious debut novel.
It's been very well received. She's had very, very positive reviews from the New York Times and things. So I look forward, I hope to see another one of her novels in a few years. And
well, you've sold me on this one, so thank you so much once again, Nancy.
okay, thank you so much, Sean.
Paula from New Zealand, from Auckland, New Zealand, is back today, and we're wearing the exact same clothes. What a coincidence, Paula. Welcome back. How did that happen? Maybe you need to do some laundry or something. Today, we're here to talk about fraud, not as a socioeconomic issue, but the title of a novel by Anita Brookner from, when was this, 1993, I believe. 1992, I guess, maybe, but originally. And you loved it. Please tell us about it.
I did love it. And I think if you love Anita Brookner, you'll love this. I mean, some people are Brookner fans and some people aren't. But there's something about Anita Brookner and the way she looks at quiet little lives, and she gives them dignity, and she builds empathy in the reader that just really appeals to me. And I think when the world's a bit crazy, sometimes looking at a quiet life and the depth of that life, it gives you a sense of peace and comfort, I think.
And I've only read what's her Booker Prize winning one?
Hotel du Lac.
Hotel du Lac, and I quite enjoyed it. I didn't quite love it, but I really enjoyed it. Parts of it I absolutely loved, and I want to read more, and I want to actually reread Hotel du Lac. But the way you've just described this as a quiet, really deeply empathetic, very literary novel, it sounds so much like a Sean book. So what's the opening premise?
It actually starts with the police coming to see a doctor, and the doctor is concerned that one of his patients has missed a number of appointments and hasn't come to see him. And that is Anna Durant. And Anna Durant is in her 50s, in her early 50s, and she is a spinster. She has been known for being the carer for her elderly invalid mother, and her mother passed away, and everyone was very concerned about Anna. And all of a sudden, the doctor realizes one day he hasn't seen Anna for a long time. She's missed some appointments. What has happened to Anna? So it sounds a bit like a mystery, but I don't think Anita Brookner really writes the typical kind of mystery. This is really a highly introspective novel. It's about Anna, but it is also almost just as much about the doctor and about a widow whose name is Vera. Those are the only two people the police sort of can find that have had sort of regular encounters with Anna. So, I mean, Anna's been such a quiet person. Her lack of her presence hasn't even been noticed. And yes, so we see Vera's life, we see Dr. Halliday's life, and we see Anna's life, because we go pretty much from the police meeting with Dr. Halliday and Vera, we jump back into the past and we see Anna's life playing out, and we see the doctor and Vera's life playing out.
We are not going to spoil anything in this conversation, but is it revealed what happened to her?
It is revealed.
Okay,
yes.
and we're not going to touch that one. And also the other question that's set up in the synopsis is, why did it take 4 months? And I think you've kind of already explained that. She was very much of a loner. And I'm just going to take a wild guess that it might be a spoiler to explain the title of the novel. Would that be a fair assumption?
I don't think it's entirely a spoiler. I think the word fraud is used probably in a couple of ways. One of them being sort of the way we put on a different face to the public and to society than what is actually going on inside us. And that is really played out in those three lives. So Anita Brookner goes into each of those lives in a lot of detail, so you're with Vera Marsh, the widow in her 80s, over the course of this day that is so quiet even for her. You can taste the cup of tea. You can sense her, boredom and her just desire for the evening paper to come so she can read the paper. And it explores her relationships with her children and quite a lot of depth. And also Dr. Halliday, who is also a quiet, introverted man. He was a potential love interest for Anna, but he is married, sort of this vivacious but somewhat petulant, childish wife. So that we get to see all of that play out as well.
And Anna's the woman who disappeared.
Anna's
The other
the
woman is Vera, right?
Yeah, so the widow is Vera and the doctor is Dr. Halliday.
And I was curious, you said over the course of a day or over the course of the day, does the kind of novel set during the course of one day?
Yeah, it does actually. It is longer than one day, but each chapter seems to be with a different character. It goes back and forth, but we do spend a quantity of time with them so that I think she wants us to feel each of them feeling awkward, lonely, very quiet inside their home, their domestic details of their living, the ways in each of them try to reach out and sort of find friendship and comfort and fail. It's quite interesting that, so here's Vera Marsh, who's this lonely elderly woman. She doesn't get along with Anna Durant. She finds her painful and annoying. So there's this frustration. Vera sees Anna as being almost a nun or a saint, she senses behind this quiet demeanor, this iron will. So she doesn't like to even be in the same room with her. So it's really quite multifaceted. And Anita Brookner takes a lot of time to go into each of those characters. They're very fully drawn.
Have you read a lot of Anita Brookner?
This is my third one. So I've read Hotel du Lac, this one, and one called The Latecomers.
Okay. And where would you put this if you had to rank those three?
It's funny because people say Anita Brookner is always the same, but those three books are actually quite different. Hotel du Lac is a lot lighter and more elegant than this.
Okay.
This one is quite ponderous and slow. And The Latecomers is a little bit more delightful. It's the story of two men who've had this lifelong friendship. They've both been refugees from World War II, and it's about their friendship looking back on it as elderly men.
Now, you just used the adjective that I always interpret negatively. You said that this one, Fraud, was ponderous. Did you mean it negatively?
No, for me, that's not a negative.
Okay.
It definitely is slow. Like, I think Anita Brookner maybe wants you to feel the loneliness and feel the deep, deep quiet in these people's lives. And you are in their heads for a long period of time.
The word ponder is not negative. It means to think, to reflect.
Yes.
But when I hear the word ponderous, I automatically think, that's no good. It's too reflective. It's tedious. But I'm going to have to think about that word anew. How about the adjective reflective?
Definitely. I don't think I've ever read a book that has got more introspection. It's amazing because it's full of insights.
This is going to be, I think, the next one I try.
I hope you like it.
Paula, you're awesome. Thank you so much.